Hi everybody, welcome to a video. We're going to do a demonstration on drawing eyes. This will be part one of three. We're going to cover the facial features, first the eyes, then the nose, then the mouth. This will be sort of further explained in the assignment, but this will be the demonstration on how to draw an eye. So there's going to be a worksheet, a step-by-step that goes with this that you'll find in the Google Classroom. So you can either look at that, you can watch this video. I think sometimes the videos are nice because you can pause it as you go. So we're going to take a look at the eye. There's certainly a lot of ways to go about doing it. Here's sort of my example. Some people go in a little bit different orders as far as what parts, but this is what I've found works best for me. We start first with the pupil. What is neat about the pupil and a couple parts of the eye is that nature has made these practically perfect circles. So when we draw these, you can always use something, a stencil, something to trace it with if you've got something that'll work as a small circle shape. And this part we're going to make really dark. It's probably the darkest part of our eye. And again, that's the pupil, that's the hole where the light goes in so that we can see. Our next step, and the way I do it, is to work on the iris. The iris is the colored part, gives you either blue, brown, green colored eyes, and the distance from the edge of the pupil varies. Obviously, if you are familiar with an eye, this sort of pupil will constrict to get either larger or smaller, depending on the amount of light, sort of like a cat's eye would. So you just want to be careful. You want to try to make it as even as you can. Some people like to sort of measure that out. I even find sometimes that I come back and will sort of enlarge my pupil sometimes if I need to get that looking a little more even. Sometimes it looks a little too weird if the pupil's a tiny little circle. They look a little crazy. Once we have that, keep in mind, one of the things I'm always reminding you is to draw lightly. You're going to be coming back and erasing some things, so keep that in mind. When we draw the iris, we're going to have the top disappear because of the eyelid. You can continue that and draw it. I sort of like to draw it really lightly so I know it's there, but it'll be gone later. Once we have this, you need to add a reflection. Sort of an eye isn't dry, so it sort of will reflect some light off it, and that can be sort of a random shape. I usually make something, depends on the light. A lot of times if it's a sort of a square rectangle light like we might have in the ceiling at school, gives you sort of a shape like that. It can be rounded, lots of different ways to sort of depict that. Once you have that in there, I like to work on the actual shape of the eye opening. First, obviously, what side of the face is this eye on? Is it the left or right eye? So I'll make this, if we're looking at a person, it is their left, or what looks like the right side to us. So the little part that we're going to clear out of sleep in the morning when you wake up will be over here, and sometimes just putting a couple dots. This is going to be the two edges of the eye. Just helps you as you go around. Now, everyone has different shaped eyes. We're going to just be doing sort of generic eyes, nose, and mouth, so it's not going to be anyone specific. Gets a little more challenging when you're trying to make it look like someone, but I like to break it up into three parts: up, over, and down. Sort of smooth that out a little bit. We need a little part here. Again, that's what you sort of would wake up and clean out in the morning, get that little sleeper stuff in it. And your bottom part. The edge of the eye, since you obviously have an eyeball that sits inside your head, separating it from this part, the white part, or the sclera is what that's called, is here. We have our iris, the pupil, and a decent little eye shape. At this point, I like now going back to the iris and start dealing with some color. So double check to make sure my spacing is nice and even all the way around. Any adjustments if I feel like that's necessary, maybe bring it down just a little bit. He said, always be careful with this, because I've certainly had drawings where the next thing I know I've made this giant, I have to start over. So eye color is a cool thing. Everyone has a different eye color. Generally, the sort of rule of thumb is the outside of the iris tends to be a little bit darker. Even if someone has brown eyes, tends to be a little bit darker on the outside and get a little bit lighter as it heads towards the middle. So what I like to do is just start with a series of lines going straight out, almost like hands on a clock. Because I'm not sure what it's made of, but whatever little muscles or fibers that let your eyes constrict and make the pupil get larger and smaller all sit in here. So once I've got that done, I'm going to add sort of the color or the value, excuse me, in a couple different ways. First, small little hatching lines. And hatching lines are just little marks, but I'm going to go first right on the outside. Short little marks, very, very tiny. I'm going to try to keep my paper level and not moving for yours. It's easier in the video, but remember what I always tell you, much easier to shift your paper around than it is to try to move your hand. So if you can, keep turning your paper as you go and keep your hand in a comfortable spot. Once I do that ring, I'm basically going to repeat it, but my hatch lines are going to become a little bit longer. I'm going to go over the ones I've drawn already, and this is going to create sort of a value or a change from light to dark in the eye, in the iris. Once I've got that, I'm sort of getting to a point where I feel like, okay, that looks pretty good. And obviously blue's going to be a little lighter than brown. Green sort of sits in the middle. And I like to, a few little, go in an opposite direction just to add some interest to it. So it's not all, because our eyes, if you look really close on a close-up photo, they're really cool. All these little lines, and they're neat. I think they're neat looking. All right, once you have that part done, we have some smaller little features, eyelashes, things like that we want to add. The first thing I like to do is sort of the little fold that is going to be when you open your eye where your eyelid goes, and that usually sits right up there. Like I said, your eyelid slips under there when you don't have your eyes closed. I sometimes like to make it just a little thicker in part, a little wider as it gets in the middle there. We're also going to need eyelashes. Eyelashes can be tricky. You don't want them to look too rigid, too straight. They're very fine, sort of little hairs. On the top, they curve out like that. Now, the best way to do it is not to draw on a solid line, but to give a little flick. Now, what this little flick of the wrist or flick of the pencil does is it actually allows that line to get a little smaller, like a hair would grow as it goes away. So again, we're sort of making up someone's eye, so we don't, normally you would be looking at the person or the picture or whoever you're trying to draw to how their eyelashes go or their features. There's actually a little shelf here that these lashes come out of. But we aren't going to worry about that right now. All right. Coming back to this little part here, I'm not quite sure what that's called, but it's sort of reddish, but it's not white, obviously, so just a little bit of shade or a little bit of texture in there certainly adds to it. Oddly enough, even though that is a white eye, there is a little bit of shadow on it that is going to come from sort of the top part of the eye. And that little bit of shadow, if you want to add it, be careful, just a tiny little bit. But by adding just a little shading there, it helps to make it look like it's rounded. Just like that. Cool thing about eyes, features, faces, stuff like that is everyone's different, so you can't give it your best shot. Like we said, just try. That's all I ask of you. When you try, I'm always amazed at how well you do. What you'll be able to sort of continue on if you want is figuring out your spacing. When you work with spacing out eyes, the rule is that however wide the eye is, that's the same distance as the space between the eyes. So if you wanted to start by drawing sort of a shape of an eye that you're going to use. Using your pencil, you can measure the size of the eye, and you'll know where to start the next one. Then you can begin by adding your various features. So once you've got that, you can certainly build onto it a little bit more. This one's sort of in progress. I'm working on some shading here, but I've pushed everything a little bit farther. We've practiced value. This was just sort of done with your normal sort of a number 2 pencil. But play around with it. It doesn't matter to me if these look fantastic or if they look silly, or I want you to enjoy, I want you to have fun, I want you to try this. And just, yeah, like I said, it's about 30 minutes a week, so if this project will be set up to where if you want to take it even farther, you can put as much into it as you want, but we're gonna, if you want to also just go through and work on these various features, the eyes, nose, and mouth, and that'll certainly meet expectations and you'll be fine. So keep on the lookout for more videos coming out. If you have any questions, let me know. And yeah, hope everyone is well and enjoy the beautiful weather. Take care, guys.